We have a new number one at the box office, and I want to see how high this guy went. I'm Adam. This is Does It Hold Up Box Office Edition, as we go over what were the top 10 movies at the box office this past weekend. As always on this show, the first thing we take a look at are the top 5 movies at the box office from this past weekend. So let's go ahead and start there, as we always do, with the number 1 movie. It was The Fall Guy. Yep, the new Ryan Gosling, Emily Blunt movie easily takes the number 1 spot with $27.7 million. It's not even close, to be honest. This movie is far and away the number 1 movie, and it got me thinking, how well do Emily Blunt and Ryan Gosling open up movies? So we have 2 new charts on the show this week. The first one is Ryan Gosling opening weekends. Let's see what the top 5 movies were that he's ever starred. The number 1 opening for Ryan Gosling is no surprise here. It happened just last year when he starred alongside Margot Robbie in the Barbie movie. That movie opened up to $162 million. His number 2 highest grossing opening weekend came when he starred in Blade Runner 2049 back in 2017. That movie made $32.7 million in its opening weekend. The Fall Guy from this past weekend is his 3rd highest grossing opening weekend with that $27.7 million. Remember the Titans is his 4th highest all the way back in 2000 with $20.9 million. And Crazy Stupid Love from 2011 made $19.1 million, rounding out his top 5. The average opening for a Ryan Gosling movie, according to his top 5 highest grossing movies, is $52.6 million. Pretty impressive, but let's take a look how that compares to Miss Emily Blunt. Her top opening of all time also came in 2023. In fact, it came the same weekend as Barbie because she starred in Oppenheimer. That movie opened up to $82.4 million, so easily her highest grossing movie of all time opening weekend. In second place for her is 2018's A Quiet Place with $50.2 million. In third place is A Quiet Place Part 2 from 2021 with $47.5 million. Also from 2021, in fourth place for her, is Jungle Cruise with $35 million. And we're going all the way back to 2010 for a movie I don't think a lot of people saw, but it's The Wolfman, which she starred with Benicio del Toro. That one took in $31.5 million. Her average for the top 5 movies in her openings is $49.3 million. So not quite the 52 plus million from Ryan Gosling, but pretty close. What's really impressive is it shows that Emily Blunt can actually open up movies better than Gosling because he got lucky enough to star in Barbie. Yes, she starred in Oppenheimer, which had a very impressive opening as well, but it only took in half of what Barbie did on that same weekend. So if you removed that from Gosling, you'd see that Emily Blunt can easily open up a movie better than him. What's also really interesting is through Gosling's top 5, you can see that Fall Guy lands in that 3rd spot, the movie that just came out this past weekend, but it wasn't anywhere on Emily Blunt's chart. In fact, to get to Fall Guy, we would have to count all the way to her number 10 highest grossing opening weekend because that's where the movie would fall. So, who needs who here? Did Gosling need Emily Blunt to help him open up this movie higher? Kind of seems that way. All right, let's go back to the charts. In second place this past weekend was a re-release of 1999's Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, with $8.7 million. In third place was Challengers in its second week, falling 49% to just $7.6 million, $29.4 million domestically so far. Pretty stronghold, I would say, and not as bad as I thought it was going to be, but I guess when you open up a little under expectations, you probably don't have as far to fall. In fourth place, new to the list, is a movie called Tarot, a horror movie about, tarot cards. It took in $6.5 million, but it's going to fall out pretty quick. In fifth place is Godzilla Kong, The New Empire at its sixth week with $4.5 million, a 37% drop. $188.1 million domestically overall. In 6th place is Civil War with $3.5 million in its 4th week, a 48% drop, and it's just crossed $62 million. In its 2nd week, Unsung Hero falls to 7th place with just under $3 million, a 61% drop, which is no surprise for a movie like this, and it's brought in $13.1 million already. In 8th place in its 9th week is Kung Fu Panda 4 with another $2.5 million, a 30% drop, but it's made $188.4 million. In 9th place is Abigail in its 3rd week with $2.3 million. Overall, a $22.8 million haul for that movie. And in 10th place is Ghostbusters Frozen Empire in its 7th week, a 43% drop for $1.8 million, and it's just under $110 million. 3 movies fell out of the top 10 this past weekend. The first was Boy Kills World after just 1 week. The Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare fell out of the top 10 after just 2 weeks. And Dune finally gives way to other movies after a very strong 9 weeks. Here's where we take a look at 2023 versus 2024. How's the box office holding up compared to the same time frame last year? So what we do is we take a look at weekend-to-weekend comparisons to see how well we're doing. It was the 18th weekend this past weekend, May 3rd through May 5th. So let's go ahead and compare those two. This year, we made $73.5 million throughout all movies released over that 3 days, which is good. It's definitely an uptick or an increase over last weekend, which was only $64.1 million. It was led by The Fall Guy having a decent opening. I wouldn't say strong, but it wasn't terrible either. 27.7 is nothing to laugh at. But it was nothing compared to last year when this same weekend, a very big final part of an MCU trilogy opened up. And yes, I'm talking about Guardians of the Galaxy, which opened up very impressively and led the way to a $159.8 million weekend. So they had a nice increase last year as well. In fact, a much better increase then compared to this past weekend. But the fact that we are still staying on pace with the last year's weekend, you can see this chart is following that same trajectory. All we really need is one movie to get us right back in it. Let's go ahead and take a look at the top 10 for 2024 so far, meaning all money made for any movie in this calendar year. Nothing on the chart has changed. Everything's exactly in the same place as it was last weekend, but there is one thing, two things of note. Dune Part 2 is in first place, followed by Kung Fu Panda 4 and Godzilla x Kong. But if you take a look at Kung Fu Panda 4 and Godzilla Kong, you'll notice that only about $352,000 separate those movies. And Godzilla is still in the top 5, while Kung Fu Panda is slowly falling down the list. So I imagine most likely next week, you're going to see those two movies switching places. Ghostbusters Frozen Empire is in 4th, with Bob Marley One Love in 5th. Wonka and Migration are 6, 7. Mean Girls and The Beekeeper are 8, 9. And Anyone But You rounds out the top 10 with $63.4 million. But Civil War is most likely going to take that spot come this chart next week because it's at 62 now. So it's only got a little bit of work to do. So I expect to be saying goodbye to Anyone But You this time next week. Here's where we take a look at the 2024 genre distribution chart, where we see what the total box office is and then what genres are making up what percentage of that number. So the total box office for the year so far is $2,130,000,000.5. And here's how it's all broken down. Action movies are making up about 39.8% of that, followed by comedies at 16.69%, dramas in 3rd place with just over 16%, then musicals, adventure, horror, thriller, suspense, and then romantic comedies, 3% still for that, and that's mostly Anyone But You. All other genres, just like last week, are making up 0.82%. So So you can see that action movies are still the most seen movies of the year. They make up the biggest percentage of the total box office. So studios are definitely taking note of that and probably planning to put out a hell of a lot more action movies in the next year or two. Alright, that's it for the charts for this past weekend's box office. But 2 weeks ago, I did a new thing here on the show. I forgot to do it last week. I was just pressed for time and didn't have time to do it. Also, I forgot. Sometimes I'm not always there. But I did bring it back this week and will continue to bring it back weeks going on. And it's the flashback part of the show. We take a look at a movie from the past to see how profitable or how unprofitable it was during its theatrical run. What better movie to look at this week than Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, in honor of its re-release. So let's take a look at that breakdown. In week 1, which was May 14th, 1999, Phantom Menace brought in just over $140 million. The studio got to keep roughly 60% of that. Now, that number might have been a little bit different because, it's Lucas, it's Star Wars. They might have asked to keep just a little bit more, but we're going to stick with these numbers for, easy viewing. So the studio got to keep 60%, which was roughly $84 million. In week 2, it brought in $67.1 million. Studio kept 55%, or $36.9 million. Domestically, it's week 3 and on, which includes this past weekend. The studio would only keep 50% of it, and then the theaters would get 50%. So it made $276 million since then, and the studio got to keep $138 million. Internationally, this movie was a giant success, bringing in $554.8 million. The studio keeps a lower percentage of overseas grosses. They only get to keep 40%, so they got to keep a nice, tidy sum of $221.9 million from international releases, and then China. The movie did not do well. It eventually got a release, which it didn't get in 1999, and it only brought in $4.1 million. The studio got 22.5% of that, so they got a gigantic sum from the Chinese box office of $922.5. The budget for this movie was estimated to be about $115 million. Not too bad. But the marketing. A lot of the reports that I found said the marketing was about $20 million. There were some other reports saying it was higher than that, and I wasn't real sure what to believe. I remember huge marketing campaigns for that movie back in 1999, and I know it's Star Wars. It pretty much sells itself, but I can't imagine they only spent $20 million on a movie that they needed to succeed. So I went and took that number and I turned it into $50 million. Some reports had it as high as $60 million. So, kind of splitting the difference there. So I went $50 million on that. The gross for the movie since it was first released is $1,042.2 million. Its net, after the theaters all took their share, is $481.8 million, which means since the theatrical release, this movie has made a profit of $316.8 million just from the theatrical release. That doesn't include toys, video games, books, licensing rights, home video, any of that. This is just from its theatrical release. That might be one of the most profitable movies of all time, which is extremely impressive, especially considering I don't think a lot of people really enjoyed this movie all that much. Alright, that's it for the show this week. Hope you enjoyed going over all the charts with me. I'll be back again next Tuesday with another roundup to see how well the box office held up. So make sure you like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff so you don't miss any videos that we do here on the channel. And until I see you again next week, remember to be good to yourself, kind to others, and, as always, keep watching movies.